Okay, so I'm just trying to get good lighting here because the sun is blazing today. This is maybe the hottest temperature ever recorded, at 39 degrees, I believe, in the south of England. See, yeah, I think I'll just trying to get a good position. Let's see, keep it there, right? Um, as long as you can hear me clearly, the volume seems to be behaving itself these days. I want to talk about Johnson's cabinet. This is very noteworthy. This is very significant. It's said to be the biggest massacre, to use political vernacular, since, well, ever. I was going to say since Harold Wilson's Night of the Long Knives in 1962 when he sacked 7 ministers, but this is bigger. I mean, it's the biggest in modern British political history. So, just to go through some of the fates of ministers here, um, James Brockenshire sacked, and that was seen as a big snub because Brockenshire had been one of the earliest backers of Boris Johnson. Philip Hammond quits. That's no surprise. That was one of the first news items yesterday. Chris Grayling quit. Rory Stewart quit. David Gauck quit. Karen Bradley sacked. Caroline Noakes sacked. And she said that she found out via Twitter before she even went to Downing Street, which is a bit of a low blow, I think. David Livington quit. David Mundell sacked. Penny Mordaunt sacked. And that one's got quite a lot of attention. She was, of course, the first woman, very briefly, in the Defence Department, the head of the Defence Department, and it was thought she may have been moved sideways, or so the fact that she is no longer in that post is going to be controversial. Claire Perry quit. Greg Clark sacked. Liam Fox sacked. Damien Hyde sacked. Jeremy White sacked. Mel Stride, Leader of Defence, sacked. Jeremy Hunt sacked. The Hunt, of course, is notable because there was a lot of attention on what sort of role would Hunt take. Apparently, he had made an ultimatum that it was either Chancellor or Deputy Prime Minister, or he would quit. And apparently, after Johnson offered him the role of defence, then when Hunt refused to take it, that's being called sacking. Yeah, I sort of, I mean, I understand why Hunt done that because technically defence is a demotion from the Foreign Office. In fact, any post outside the four great offices of state is technically a demotion. On the other hand, it may look like Hunt is disrespecting the office of Secretary of State for Defence, which I would say is still a pretty important role. So he's now out. And the question is which ministers are going to join Phil Guevara's rebellion, as it's being put. Um, this is going to be a rocky government, I think, on the grounds that you are going to have a lot of potentially upset people. Well, people who may be bitter, people who may feel that they've been snubbed. Um, for a prime minister to choose his or her new cabinet, there's always going to be some people are demoted or lose a job simply not because they're bad, but just to make way for someone else. But this is definitely without precedent. Um, so I think Johnson's going to have a real headache on his hands from backbenchers. That would be my speculation. Um, whether Theresa May stays on as a backbencher or not, I don't know. So let's see who we have in the new positions. The four great officers of state. I want to talk a little bit about those. So, Prime Minister, of course, Boris Johnson, lifelong ambition. Sajid Javid makes history as the highest ranking ethnic minority politician in British history. Our first British-Asian Chancellor of the Exchequer, effectively the second most powerful man in the country. He used to keep a bust of Margaret Thatcher, or a portrait of Margaret Thatcher, I should say, in his office. I'm not really surprised by that. I'd always seen Javid sort of gearing towards Treasury more so than Premiership at this point. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, again, he's risen pretty fast. He had a strong performance in the leadership debates, not without controversy, of course. Some see him as a little bit abrasive. Some see him as apparently aides dislike the fact that he likes to draft his own speeches. He's also unpopular or controversial in feminist circles, although personally I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. If you don't know what I'm referring to, he once got a controversy for writing an article saying that feminists were the most obnoxious bigots today. Well, I dislike the premise that because he criticised feminism, then oh well, that's a bad thing. Why should feminism be above criticism? Many people would agree with that assessment. Um, judge his record on women's rights rather than his views on feminism. I mean, that's to me pretty obvious. Home Secretary Priti Patel, another British Asian. She's the fourth woman in the role and first British Asian in that role. Patel's controversy lies in the fact she wants to support the death penalty, which of course critics would say is too hardline. I'm not personally in favour of the death penalty, but I do think you need someone who is hardline on crime and justice in the Home Office. Um, I mean, what a lot of people want to see, of course, they want to see a reduction in violent crime, but they also want to see, I think, a Home Secretary who is on the side of victims, and this also applies to Justice Secretary. I'm pleased that David Gauke's gone. I was not impressed by him in the Justice Department. I honestly don't know anything about the new Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland. Um, so time will tell. I think the Justice Secretary needs to show that he is on the side of victims of crime. The Tories are supposed to be the party of law and order. As Mayor of London, Johnson brought down violent crime. So um, let's see what happens. So those are the four great officers of state. Dominic Cummings, the engineer of the Vote Leave campaign, was a controversial um, person that's come into not into the cabinet. I don't know if he's an elected MP even, but he's been brought into the fold, I believe, as one of Johnson's advisors. That's going to be controversial. Some will say this is a hard right cabinet. I think it's definitely a lurch to the right. There's no question about that. The truth is, in an ideal situation, it would be a unity cabinet with a significant number of Remainers. As someone pointed out, it's diverse in terms of demographics, not in terms of politics. Actually, I think it was Malcolm Rifkin pointed that out at CNN. Um, the truth is, I mean, as someone who voted Remain, I could definitely see the merit of having Remainers in the cabinet. But then again, Theresa May went for that Ministry of All the Talents and she got burned. So as much as I really, really don't want to see a no deal Brexit, what I think would be worse is for this thing to prolong further and further and for us to have a situation where there's more bitterness, more division and prolonged uncertainty. As much as I don't want to see a no deal, I think that would be even worse at this point. I mean, Brexit is toxic. Um, in terms of Johnson's initial speech, there was some speculation that he was pitching for a general election. He was talking about social care, about crime, about issues outside Brexit. So some think that may be a pitch towards a general election. Of course, it would be a big gamble. The Tories have a very small majority government at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in his first Prime Minister's questions, Johnson versus Corbyn, to see how he performs with that. So interesting times in politics. The other roles I'll just quickly say before I run out of time here. Stephen Barclay, Brexit Secretary, he's been brought back. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, de facto Deputy Prime Minister. Although in Britain that's a bit of a not a concrete term. Um, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, who's a former Scots Guard, International Trade Secretary Liz Truss, Health Secretary Matt Hancock stays, one of the few ministers to stay in his post, Environment Theresa Villiers, Education Gavin Williamson, Digital Culture, Media and Sport Nicky Morgan, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Andrea Leadsom, Housing Robert Jenrick, Work and Pensions Amber Rudd remains, Justice Secretary Robert Buckland, Transport Grant Shapps, International Development Alok Sharma, Wales Alan Cairn stays in his post, Julian Smith in the Northern Ireland brief, Alistair Jack in the Scotland brief, Chief Whip Mark Spencer, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Rishi Sunak and the Attorney General Geoffrey Cox stays in his post. Um, and finally, I can understand a lot of those appointments because it makes it hard for Labour to criticise. Uh, One could argue that the Tories are more diverse at the moment. Um, I think that's definitely important. I do think that Britain is a diverse country, so it's very important that that is represented. But I wouldn't want a situation where it sort of sets a precedent whereby the next prime minister must have two ethnic minority people in the great offices of state just to match Johnson's. It should be meritocracy, and I don't like the premise that a white middle-aged man will get demoted solely because he's a white middle-aged man. No doubt that's always going to happen. Why do people feel sorry for Penny Mordaunt and not James Brockenshire, for example? Um, but that's in the real world, identity politics plays a massive role. Anyway, I'm not against Javid and Patel in those roles. I think they're capable politicians. But like I said, it's a hard right government. I'm going to have strong disagreements on many areas. But what we absolutely need, is an end of this uncertainty. That, to me, is probably the biggest priority this country faces, is some stability. There could well be a general election. So interesting times in British politics.